Hello, and welcome to the Get Lean and Eat Clean podcast. My name is Brian Grin. I'm a certified health coach, trainer, and author. And this podcast is for middle-aged men and women looking to optimize their health and get their bodies back to what it once was 10 to 15 years ago. I will give you simple, actionable items to get long-term sustainable results. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show. All right, welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. My name is Brian Grin. I hope you had a great weekend and happy Tuesday. If you're listening to this on Tuesday, hope you had a chance to listen to my interview with Josh Deck. He's an ex-paramedic, holistic nutritionist, and specializes in gut health. So we touched on, how chronic stress can affect your gut, how low stomach acid could be the cause of acid reflux. We got into nutrient depletion in our food system, Josh's morning and evening routine, and much, much more. So if you haven't already, definitely check out my interview with Josh Deck. That's episode 314. Now, on today's micro podcast, I sort of wanted to come back to the basics. I've been going on some topics that may be a little bit out there, like the magnetism and things like that. But I try to keep things fresh and find things that are applicable that you can apply on a daily basis. And my thought was to get back to the basics because we are getting to the new year. And so I wanted to use my system that I use with my clients. I sort of using my book. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see the Stepladder system. I've put a lot of work into this book, and I figured there's so much great information. And we really focus on those main pillars of health because, that's where you're going to get, 80, 90% of the results from. And so one of the things that we do in the book is we have you assess where you're at. I think it's really important in life, in business, in sport, in health, to really say, well, okay, where am I at in certain areas and where do I need to focus on? And I need to do this. I have to do this for my life and for my health. I've already wrote some goals out for myself as far as that, and I'll still accumulate those goals and also try to assess, like, what have I done in the last year or a few years to help get to those points. But, finding out areas of weakness, I think, are important, and focusing on those. So with the 6-pillar assessment, this is chapter 11 from my book, The Stepladder System. We really go into like this full, honest, complete view of what your health has looked like and what areas need work. And we sort of, I have you rate it from a 1 to 5, and I'm not going to go through every statement that I put as far as is concerned with this assessment. But the first thing that we touch on is creating some type of clarity. And without a strong reason why, essentially, a lot of times people stumble whenever they get inconvenienced because they don't really have a strong reason why. And I talk about in the book, your reason why isn't just the thing you need to get started. It's the reason you'll hold on to keep going, right? And so there's a lot of temptation out there. So you really got to have a strong why. And this is the first step I take with all my clients, is to make sure that they get their arms around this and really understand, why they want to make a change. So, because essentially without it, a lot of times you end up going back to your old ways. Changing habits is not easy. So really honing in on this and creating clarity this is the first step. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can sort of see, this is my workbook. I like to call it a book, but it's almost like a workbook because I really want you to take action. And one of those action steps is creating some type of clarity and assessing where you're at. Next is small changes and big results. So I really think it's important with any goal. Let's say in the new year you want to, lose inches around your waist or gain muscle. You got to sort of assess where you're at, right? So take measurements. Do a food log. I've talked about logging your food for at least like a week. Doesn't have to be forever. Or if you want to lose inches around your waist, taking measurements or going to a DEXA scan, right? Seeing where you're at. And small changes, big results is, the idea about this is starting small and creating momentum. So let's get small wins right off the bat. And so whatever that first step will be, it'll be, but taking that first step is probably the most important one, right? It's like, people say, oh, I have clients who like, the toughest part is just, getting to the gym or getting or coming to see me. And then once they see me, that, then the rest is easy. So, it's all about like showing up, they always say, right? So we want to get small wins right off the bat. And we talk about that in this assessment. The next assessment that we go through is, sleep, right? Um, where are you at with your sleep? I think this is so fundamentally like important for anybody. It's a question that comes up with a lot of my clients. Um, if you don't get your sleep sorted out, a lot of things won't fall into place. So we really need to wrap our arms around what's going on with your sleep if this is an issue. And so we assess this as well. And then from there we get into, can you guess what's next? Stress, right? So some type of assessment around, well, do you sweat the small stuff all the time? Um, do you do have you any type of mindfulness practice? We have to sort of figure out what have we done, what type of self-care have we done with ourselves over the last year, in order to increase our mindfulness and our, spirituality. And I'm not saying that you have to be some type of monk who's meditating, an hour every day, but I think that if having some type of mindfulness, whether it's a 5-minute meditation or going to a yoga practice, or working on breathing techniques, just having something that it's just you and nothing else, not your phone, not your computer, your kids aren't around, it's just you. And so this is something that we assess as well. Next, after that, we get into eating. And again, this could be a whole rabbit hole, right? But I like to keep it simple. Um, you know, are you eating too close to bed? Or what are 80% of the foods that you're eating? Because we normally eat the same things over and over again. And if you are eating those same things, are those in the 80% good? Or are they in the 20, or like, do you find yourself always going to, to highly palatable, highly processed foods? So we get into that, fast food and takeout and things like that, things that we want to try to avoid, and cooking for yourself is huge. So we get into the eating part, because how could you not, right? That's one important aspect. And then we get into movement, so important to have movement. I just interviewed my first yogi that'll be coming out in a few weeks. But, we just talk about, just doing the little things every day and these micro workouts, which I've done a short episode on that. So check that out. That was God, what episode was that? I did an episode on micro workouts, episode 311, where you can just do stuff throughout the day and 10, 15 minutes. It's better than nothing, that's for sure. And it's a good place to start. So we talk about that, moving like you mean it, right? Resistance training, I think, should be first and foremost on your mind. If you're not doing any type of lifting, starting to implement lifting into your life is so key and crucial as you get older. So, and that's what we sort of go through, and we have sort of where you are now. So this assessment, if you're watching on YouTube, where you are now, and then 6 months later, and then 1 year later. And I think it's important to just assess where you're at. Where do you want to be in the next 6 months, as we're coming up on the new year? And then in the end of the year, where do you want it? Where does that look like for you? So, getting on track and staying the course is really important. I think it's important to get a coach, whether it's me or someone else, in any area of your life, but especially health, because if we don't have our health, what do we have? So anyways, I just wanted to go through sort of my assessment that I take people through in the Stepladder system, because I think it's applicable for most people. If you got questions, feel free to email me, brian@briangrin.com. And if you just want to chat for 15 minutes, you could jump on my website, briangrin.com, and we could just have a free little chat and see where you're at, and take it from there. So have a great rest of the day. I will leave a link in the show notes for if you want to talk to me for 15 minutes. I'm here for you. So I will leave that in the show notes, and I look forward to talking with you on Friday with another great interview. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks for listening to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. I understand there are millions of other podcasts out there, and you've chosen to listen to mine, and I appreciate that. Check out the show notes at briangrin.com for everything that was mentioned in this episode. Feel free to subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend or family member that's looking to get their body back to what it once was. Thanks again, and have a great day.